Chapter 902. Now, you know how to beg for mercy? Jingyu stared coldly at the ink Qilin that she was choking. She didn't loosen her grip, but she didn't exert any more force either. She looked at the ink Qilin and spoke coldly. I don't want to kill you. You're the one who keeps forcing me to kill you. Jingyu stared silently at the ink Qilin and said, if you want to subdue others, you should be prepared to be subdued. How arrogant do you think a little beast like you can be? No matter how capable you are, you can only dominate this forest. Scram, Jingyu said indifferently. She raised her hand and flung the ink Qilin away. It landed on the ground. The little ink Qilin let out a painful meow and coughed a few times. Its green eyes stared at Jingyu in horror. Meow. Woo. Hearing Jingyu's clear cry, the black Qilin was so shocked that its body trembled, as if it was extremely frightened. It limped into the dense forest and disappeared. The big guys looked at each other in dismay when the little ink Qilin disappeared. It looked so human-like. Why are you still keeping it? Do you want to keep it for supper? Jingyu glanced at them with her golden eyes and said coldly. The ink Qilins were like birds startled by the twang of a bow. They let out low cries and all disappeared without a trace. In an instant, the forest that was filled with ink Qilins disappeared without a trace. Everyone lying on the edge of the cliff had the same expression on their faces. They stared blankly at Jingyu, who was standing in the middle of the forest. They were stunned for more than 10 seconds and couldn't recover from the shock for a long time. What happened just now? It seemed like that ferocious ink Qilin was scared away by a little girl. At this moment, everyone's worldview seemed to have been destroyed. They were completely confused. The surroundings returned to silence. Jingyu lowered her eyes slightly. Her golden eyes slowly dissipated and turned into an ink-black color. There was a strong sense of exhaustion between her brows. She turned to look at Xiaochun. Xiaochun, I'm so sleepy. Jingyu looked sleepy. It's okay. Go to sleep if you're tired. Xiaochun had been standing behind Jingyu the whole time. He looked at everything calmly. Now, he saw Jingyu chase away all the ink Qilins like a king. He looked at Jingyu, who turned around and looked exhausted. Jingyu closed her eyes and leaned her head on Xiaochun's shoulder. Actually, Jingyu's thinking was very simple. She could be very arrogant because she knew clearly that there was an indomitable man behind her. Even if she broke the sky, he would still be there. Therefore, Jingyu could be unscrupulous and arrogant. She could show her exhaustion. She could sleep peacefully without any uneasiness or discomfort. She quietly leaned on Xiaochun's shoulder and closed her eyes. Xiaochun lifted Jingyu up in his arms. This woman, who fought for everyone, walked down from the dazzling stage and into his arms. Next, nothing was more important than Jingyu. Next, it was his turn to protect her. Xiaochun quietly carried Jingyu and walked towards the edge of the cliff. When everyone saw Xiaochun walk over, they came back to their senses and stood up to watch Xiaochun carry Jingyu. Chapter 903. Someone seemed to want to speak, but before he could speak, Xiaochun's extremely cold gaze swept over him. That implied warning gaze made that person swallow silently, swallow back the words on the tip of his tongue, and silently lower his head. No one made a sound. They silently watched as Xiaochun carried Jingyu into the water curtain. They watched as Xiaochun gently placed Jingyu on the haystack and sat beside her. Jingyu moved her body and fell into a deep sleep next to Xiaochun. Everyone stood outside and looked at each other. Finally, they tiptoed into the cave. Under Xiaochun's cold warning glare, everyone seemed to have relaxed their breathing. Looking at Jingyu sleeping in Xiaochun's arms, they began to wonder if what they had just seen was a dream. This night was very long. When the sky was completely bright, the light shone into the stone cave. Only then did the sleeping people wake up from their dreams one by one. They stretched lazily and laughed as they woke up the people around them. What a good sleep. Zhanqi stretched his body and said with a smile, I had a very perverted dream last night. Do you want to hear it? I also had a very perverted dream. Another person chimed in excitedly. Hee. Did you dream that the 9th Imperial concubine scared off all the ink Qilins? Shangguan Hongwan heard their words and laughed sinisterly. Ha 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 ha. That's right. Wasn't this dream very perverted? Zhanqi laughed excitedly and slapped his thigh. His laughter was terrifying. Everyone looked at Zhanqi as if they were looking at an idiot. Haha, isn't it funny? Why aren't you laughing? Zhanqi laughed for a long time before she felt strange. She glanced at everyone and finally looked at Shangguan Hongwan as if she realized something. How did you know I had this dream? Because we all had the same dream. Shangguan Hongwan said grumpily. He stood up and walked to the waterfall to get some water to wash his face. Fuck, you all had the same dream? Zhanqi's eyes widened in horror. She seemed to be very surprised as she said, Are we possessed? How could we all have the same dream? Li Weiming took a deep breath. He raised his hand and slapped Zhanqi's shoulder. Brother, I think you are really possessed. After Li Weiming said that, he walked to the waterfall to wash his face. Jingyu, who had just woken up, saw such an interesting scene. She almost laughed out loud and trembled in Xiao Qin's arms. Hey, what did you give to my daughter? Just as Jingyu was trying to hold back her laughter, she suddenly heard a call from the other side. It immediately attracted Jingyu's attention. Water. By the waterfall, Shangguan Linglan finished washing his face and was eating dry food. He was ready to leave after eating. Xing Er saw that Shangguan Linglan had no water in his hand while eating, so he silently handed his water over. Shangguan Hongwan happened to see it on the other side. So this scene happened. Take it away. If my daughter wants to drink, she should drink my water. Shangguan Hongwan raised his hand and threw back the water that Xing Er handed over. He raised his hand and walked away with Shangguan Linglan's shoulder. He stared at Xing Er vigilantly. Chapter 904. Xing Er's face darkened when he saw Shangguan Hongwan's actions. He silently took his water and walked away. Dad. Shangguan Linglan was stunned by the scene in front of him. He followed Jingyu and Xiao Chun all the way here, so it was normal for Xing Er to pass water to him. Shanghai Linglan didn't think much of it, but what was going on now? Daughter, you can't drink other men's food. Shangguan Hongwan looked at Shangguan Linglan with a dignified expression and said, What if someone drugged it? You have to be more careful. You can't be so reckless in the future. Shangguan Linglan's face darkened. Drugged? Pfft. Jingyu almost spat out the water. That's right. Little sister, you have to be careful when you're outside. What was even more frightening was that Shangguan Linglan's brothers were nodding their heads in agreement. At this moment, Jingyu's heart was about to collapse. She silently turned to look at Xing Er. For some reason, she felt that the biscuit in Xing Er's hand was almost deformed. Xing Er, it's been hard on you. Jingyu silently reached out and patted Xing Er's shoulder. She said with pity, Aren't you going to eat the biscuit in your hand? If you don't want to eat it, give it to me. Xiao Chun and Xing Er's faces darkened. They silently stared at Jingyu. Jingyu laughed dryly. Don't waste it. Jingyu replied righteously. After the group packed up, they left the waterfall. Standing outside the forest, they could still see the traces of the battle last night. The trampled grass and the messy scene made everyone silently turn to look in Jingyu's direction. The air is really good. Jingyu sighed silently. She walked forward with a smile on her face. Look at her face, it was as if she didn't know anything. Look at her face, it was as if she really didn't know anything. Everyone's face darkened. Wow, it's really like a dream. Zhanqi's exaggerated voice sounded. Everyone silently turned to look. They saw Zhanqi jumping and shouting excitedly. It's here. Last night in my dream your grandpa. Fuck. Li Weiming couldn't stand it anymore. He kicked Zhanqi's butt and scolded him fiercely. Have you seen more than 100 people having the same dream? Zhanqi was kicked into the haystack by Li Weiming. He lay on the ground with a blank face. Everyone glanced at Zhanqi silently and left with Jingyu and Xiao Chun. When Zhanqi recovered from this matter, he had completely gone crazy. No, I didn't have a dream. Then, what happened last night was real. Zhanqi's eyes instantly widened. He hurriedly jumped up with a frightened face and chased after the group. Jingyu and the group walked forward slowly. They had walked for a long distance, but they didn't see any trace of the black Qilin. Jingyu frowned strangely. If she met the black Qilin, should she run? Or not run? If she ran, she would run. She felt that she was too cowardly. She was so awesome last night. Why did she become a coward today? Thinking about it, it seemed that she couldn't run. But if she really met the black Qilin, if she didn't run, it would summon a large group of Qilins and swallow them up. What should she do? Chapter 905. Now that she thought about it, she still had to run. Along the way, Jingyu was entangled with this problem. She silently bypassed a bush. As soon as she bypassed it, she directly bumped into something. She really bumped into it. Jingyu stumbled and took a step back. When she looked up and saw what she bumped into, Jingyu instantly lost her composure. Holy shit. She was right. The black Qilin really came. The human and beast stared at each other for a long time. Then, just as Jingyu swallowed her saliva silently and was about to do something, the black Qilin, which was originally charging towards them, howled and ran away as if it had seen a ghost. It ran away? It ran away. Jingyu stared dumbfounded at the black Qilin, which had run into the bush at the speed of light and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Jingyu was instantly confused. The people behind Jingyu, who had been prepared to run away, were also confused. What the hell is going on? Jingyu stared blankly in front of her and muttered. Everyone had a strange look on their faces. They still couldn't figure it out. Fine, they met another one. Then, why did it run away again? Jingyu and the others were completely shocked. It was as if they had discovered something fun. They saw that the black Qilin didn't run away this time. Instead, it rushed forward. Then, the black Qilin ran away as if it had seen a ghost. Jingyu and the others were having a great time. In the blink of an eye, all the black Qilins in the area had disappeared. Ha ha ha, this is so fun. Everyone laughed wildly. They had been bullied by these black Qilins for the past few days. They had been chased like cowards. Now, they could finally hold their heads high. Hey, this is so fun. These black Qilins actually ran away when they saw us. Everyone was excited. The blood that had been suppressed by the black Qilins was stimulated one by one. I must fucking kill these little bastards. That's right. There's simply no way we can survive being hunted down. Now, let's go. Let's go chase after the black Qilin. Ha 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 ha. The corners of Jingyu's mouth twitched as she looked at the men rubbing their palms together. Her mouth twitched violently as she sighed silently. She really couldn't understand what was going on. Could it be that they were frightened by her last night? No way. She had only said get lost and be a midnight snack. Was there a need to be so scared? Jingyu silently pursed her lips and turned to look at the excited crowd. She thought for a moment and said, "Why don't we go catch a black Qilin and ask him what's going on?" Obviously, everyone agreed with her suggestion. And then, this legendary forbidden area of the Black Earth domain went crazy. This. Over here. Fuck. Hurry up. It's all your fault for being too slow. He ran away. Here's more. Quick. You've got a bunch of shit. What's the use of that? The entire forest was filled with such voices. Jingyu and Xiao Chen leaned leisurely against a tree trunk and silently watched the group of men scurry up and down in search of the black Qilin. The corners of their mouths twitched violently and their eyes revealed a deep smile. Xiao Chen, aren't you going to play? Jingyu asked with a faint smile in her eyes as she looked up at Xiao Chen. Chapter 906. To accompany you, Xiao Chen glanced sideways at Jingyu and replied calmly. Instantly, a faint smile appeared in Jingyu's eyes. The forest was in chaos, and there were shouts everywhere. Everyone was having fun. What made Jingyu speechless was that Shangguan Hongwan had joined them. Looking at his enthusiasm, the corners of Jingyu's mouth twitched. What was this old man trying to do? Caught it. Seeing that everyone had struggled for so long and finally heard this voice, Jingyu and Xiao Chen, who were bored, chased after the source of the shouts. There, a black Qilin was tied to a tree trunk. Everyone held swords in their hands and stared at the black Qilin in front of them. When Jingyu arrived, She could almost clearly feel that this black Qilin was so scared that its little heart was about to explode. You, what are you doing? Jingyu looked at the tied-up black Qilin with a frown. Nothing, nothing. Zhang Qi and the rest swallowed their saliva silently. They looked at Jingyu and Xiao Chun with a smile and said, "Didn't you want to ask questions? Ask away." As they spoke, everyone stepped back. They stood around one side and stared curiously at Jingyu, as if they wanted to see how Jingyu would ask the question. Jingyu silently glared at everyone. Then she went forward and squatted down. She raised her hand and touched the black Qilin's head. She had never looked at the black Qilin so carefully under this kind of light. It turned out that the black Qilin looked like this. It was Jingyu's first time seeing the legendary Qilin. However, this Qilin didn't look like much. Only its shiny fur made Jingyu curious. She reached out and stroked the black Qilin's fur. Immediately, the black Qilin hummed and looked at Jingyu with tears in its eyes. Jingyu squatted beside the black Qilin and silently raised her hand to touch its head. She asked, "Come, tell me properly. Why are you running?" Everyone behind her had strange expressions on their faces. They muttered in their hearts, "This is a wild beast, a wild beast. How can it understand you when you talk to it like that? But if you don't say that, then what should you say? Could it be that you have to speak the beast language?" Speaking of which, there were people who understood the beast language, but no one had seen them before. "What? You want me to quickly find a way out and get out?" Jingyu's face darkened as she listened to the black Qilin growling from its throat. Jingyu swore to the heavens that she really didn't know what the black Qilin was saying. However, the meaning that was transmitted to Jingyu's mind was very clear. It was as if you didn't say anything, but I can feel what you want to say. It was a magical feeling, but Jingyu wasn't unfamiliar with it at all. Because when she was communicating with Yin Jian, Yin Feng, and Zhonghua, Jingyu felt the same. When she was with Yin Jian and Yin Feng in the past, Jingyu only felt that it was a kind of tacit understanding. However, it didn't seem to be the case now. When a beast expressed its obedience to her, Jingyu could clearly feel it. Chapter 907. Just like now, Jingyu was communicating with it without any difference in language. "What? Your boss gave the order?" Jingyu propped up her chin and looked at the black Qilin in front of her. "So, because you wanted us to get out quickly, you ran away the moment you saw us? Can you be a little more mature?" Jingyu raised her hand and smacked the black Qilin's head. She scolded fiercely, "Isn't it just one failure? Do you have to be so cowardly? Get up, get up." "Air that." Zhang Qi coughed slightly and said hesitantly, "It is tied up. It can't get up." "Oh, I forgot." Jingyu touched the tip of her nose and said, "Then hurry up and untie it." Hearing that, Zhang Qi walked over silently and untied the rope that bound the black Qilin. The black Qilin finally regained its freedom. It shook its body and looked at Jingyu and the others with grievance. It did not look like a beast at all. "Go back and tell that little kitten that we are tired and don't want to find our way out. Either one of you can come and take us out, or we will stay here." Jingyu stood up and said arrogantly to the black Qilin in front of her. The black Qilin was stunned by Jingyu's words and looked at Jingyu in a daze. "Don't you understand human language? Hurry up and go report it." Jingyu scolded fiercely. She lifted her foot and kicked the black Qilin's butt. The black Qilin cried out a few times from Jingyu's kick. Then, it scampered away under everyone's dumbfounded gaze. Everyone watched until the black Qilin ran far away. Then, they all turned their heads and looked at Jingyu with hesitation. They swallowed their saliva and looked at Jingyu, unable to say a word for a long time. That's it? Could the black Qilin really understand Jingyu's words? Speaking of which, what did Jingyu just say? What's the matter? Why are you all looking at me? Jingyu looked at everyone strangely and walked silently to Xiao Qin's side. Ahem, nothing. Nothing. Disperse. Shangguan Hongwen looked away from Jingyu and yelled for everyone to get ready to go down the river to catch some fish. In this black soil area, the only living thing besides the black Qilin was the fish in the water. Aya, Miss Jingyu let the black Qilin go too quickly. Zhang Qi slapped his thigh and said regretfully, "We wanted to taste the black Qilin's meat, That's right. My sabers are ready. Everyone cheered when they heard this. They raised the sabers in their hands and said, "Can't you guys be a little more promising?" Jingyu held her forehead and said, "If we want to eat, we have to eat the black Qilin boss's meat. What's so good about eating it?" The black Qilin's meat? Everyone paused and then frowned. They looked at Jingyu and said, "That kitten? Miss Jingyu, that kitten is so small. There are so many of us. I don't know if it's enough for each of us to drink a mouthful of soup." Jingyu's face darkened. She stared coldly at everyone and said, "Do you guys really want to eat it?" Chapter 908. Cough, cough, cough. That's catching fish. Catching fish. Everyone silently turned their heads back and didn't speak. Everyone cheered and jumped into the water to catch a large basket of fish. They set up a fire and roasted the fish over the fire to eat. They had been busy running for their lives these days and hadn't even had the chance to eat a proper meal. Now, they could finally eat something delicious. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the roasted fish rack. Once a fish was roasted, it was immediately snatched away. These people almost fought because of this. Jingyu silently set up a fire on the side. She glanced over and was really worried about the IQ of these people. Some people saw Jingyu's actions and imitated her. They went to the other side and set up torches to continue roasting fish. Jingyu also took out a small medicine bag from her waist. Shangguan Linglan and Lu Miaoqiu both looked over and curiously watched Jingyu open the small medicine bag and sprinkle the powder-like thing on the fish. Suddenly, everyone's eyes widened in curiosity. Yeah, what are you sprinkling?" Shangguan Linglan looked down at the fish on the rack and looked at Jingyu with a conflicted expression. "You didn't poison it, right?" Jingyu looked at Shangguan Linglan like she was looking at an idiot and said, "Have you ever seen anyone poison it so openly? Or poison themselves?" "Ugh." Shangguan Linglan silently touched the tip of his nose and said, "If it's not poison, then what did you sprinkle just now?" "Seasoning bag," Jingyu said calmly. "I specially made the seasoning bag for wilderness survival. It's an exclusive secret recipe." "Wow, it smells so good." While Jingyu was still talking, the grilled fish on the rack emitted a rich aroma. This aroma was much stronger than the original grilled fish. The people next door began to wrinkle their noses. "What's that smell? It smells so good." Everyone turned their heads and stretched their necks to look at Jingyu. Their eyes widened as they stared at the grilled fish on Jingyu's fire. It was clearly the same fish, but why was the fragrance coming from Jingyu's side so strong? Everyone suddenly felt that they couldn't swallow the grilled fish in their hands. Hee. All right. The corners of Jingyu's mouth curled into a satisfied smile. She lifted her hand to pick up the fish on the grill and carefully blew on it. Smelling the aroma of the grilled fish, she nodded with satisfaction. She opened her mouth and carefully took a bite. Her eyes were filled with satisfaction. "Xiaochun, try it." Jingyu turned her head and handed the fish to Xiaochun. He could clearly feel the envious, excited, and drooling faces of the people next door. Xiaochun calmly took a bite of the fish. His eyes lit up as he nodded in admiration. His eyebrows curved slightly as he said, "It's delicious. Eat more if it's delicious." When Jingyu heard Xiaochun's approval, her eyes lit up with joy. She handed the fish in her hand over to Xiaochun. Just as Xiaochun was about to take a bite, a black figure suddenly flashed in front of Xiaochun and Jingyu. In the blink of an eye, Jingyu only had the stick in her hand. "Where's the fish? Where's the fish?" Jingyu stared at the stick in front of her in shock for a full 3 seconds. Then, she turned her head to look at the bushes. A small figure was hugging Jingyu's fish and squatting on the ground. He anxiously took a bite of the fish and jumped up from the scalding fish. Chapter 909. This small figure. Wasn't this the legendary leader of the enchanting who was the size of a kitten? Holy shit. Thief who stole the fish. Jingyu suddenly roared. When everyone saw that it was the legendary leader of the enchanting, they silently swallowed the fish in their mouths. For some reason, they looked at the little enchanting. although it was the leader of the ink cheilants. But why couldn't they raise their guard? Meow. The little guy was startled by Jing Yu's roar and jumped twice. Then, it excitedly swished a few times and ate all the fish. It seemed to be eating too fast. Jing Yu could clearly see that the little guy's cheeks were completely bulging. Do you have to work so hard? Jing Yu looked at the little guy who was swallowing with all his might. She was really afraid that the little guy would choke to death. She raised her hand and took the water bottle. She squatted beside the little guy and handed it to him. Drink it. It's not poisoned. Jing Yu looked at the little guy calmly and said, Woo woo. The little ink cheilin couldn't speak at all. It looked at Jing Yu with some fear. Perhaps it couldn't take it anymore, so it hurriedly grabbed the water bottle and poured water into it. Under Jing Yu's gaze, the little guy's belly slowly bulged. Pfft, it's like a rubber ball. Jing Yu looked at the little guy who was burping on the ground. Her eyes were full of smiles. The little guy looked at Jing Yu curiously with its pitch-black eyes. Seeing Jing Yu's smiling face, it seemed to feel Jing Yu's joy. Meow. The little ink cheilin called. Jing Yu lowered her head. It ate the fish you gave me. Just then, they heard Xiao Qin's gloomy voice. Jing Yu paused and looked up. The little black cheilin also looked up at Xiao Qin. Their actions were surprisingly in sync. When he looked over, all he saw was Xiao Qin's tall figure, his incomparably gloomy face, and his pair of ink-black eyes that were suffused with coldness. It was simply enough to make one's heart tremble. So scary. At this moment, the little black cheilin was so scared that its fur was about to explode. Its face was full of terror. Meow. Just as Xiao Qin raised his hand and was about to do something, little Tacit screamed out of reflex. Then, she rushed into Jing Yu's arms, shrunk her neck, and blinked her eyes at Xiao Qin. Why do they all like to snuggle into my arms? Jing Yu's face darkened. Something had suddenly jumped into her arms, scaring Jing Yu so much that she almost flung it away. When she saw that it was this little fellow, her face darkened. Was she not scary enough? It had clearly been so scared of her last night. Why did it suddenly think of her as a good person after seeing Xiao Qin? Jing Yu looked up at Xiao Qin, conflicted. She stood up and picked up the little fellow's fur. She stared at the little fellow for a long time, then turned to Xiao Qin and said, Xiao Qin, are you sure this little fellow is really a cheilin, not a cat? Xiao Qin looked coldly at the little cheilin in Jing Yu's arms and said indifferently, I used to have the same suspicions, so I gave it a name. It's called Little Meow. What? Jing Yu stared blankly at Xiao Qin. The corners of her mouth twitched. She looked at Xiao Qin strangely and asked, Could it be that you met this little fellow a few years ago in the forbidden area of the Black Soil Zone? Chapter 9-10. Xiao Qin raised his hand and took the little thing from Jing Yu's hand. He called out in a very calm voice, Little Meow, Meow. The little black cheilin in Xiao Qin's hand trembled violently. Its head drooped down, and it looked very weak. Jing Yu stared at this scene with her mouth agape. Xiao Qin, what did you do to this little thing in the past? Jing Yu looked at Xiao Qin with a conflicted expression. What did Xiao Qin do to make this little thing cower when it heard the word Little Meow? Oh, I forgot too. Xiao Qin quietly placed the little thing on the ground and said calmly, I probably plucked its fur and wanted to see what a cheilin's fur looked like. I roasted it with fire and accidentally dropped it into the water. I forgot to save it. After Xiao Qin silently told her a series of things, Jing Yu was still completely petrified. She looked at Little Meow, who was sitting on the ground with its head lowered. Jing Yu sighed deeply. It's so good to see you alive. Jing Yu patted the little thing's head. Her heart ached for it. Meow. Little Meow was so moved that it was about to cry. Who could understand its pain? Now that it thought about what happened in the past, it felt like crying. Jing Yu pulled Xiao Qin back to his seat. The roast fish was still going on. Because the aroma of Little Meow's roast fish made everyone hungry, they all came to Jing Yu to ask for the secret recipe. Jing Yu didn't bring much with her, so she used it all up. Xiao Qin, you came to the forest of the Black Soil region so long ago. Was this little thing this small back then? Jingyu blinked and asked Xiaochun. I think. It was a little smaller than this. Xiaochun quietly said. It should have just learned how to walk. I picked it up because it was fun. Jingyu's mouth twitched when she heard that. She looked at little Meow, who was squatting in front of them, and sighed silently. The reason why the black Qilin is afraid of water can't be because you almost drowned it in the past, right? I don't know. Xiao Chun was silent for a moment, then he spat out 3 words. It's been hard on you. Jingyu silently looked at the little black Qilin in front of her. The little thing pitifully rubbed Jingyu's hand. Its expression was so cute, Jingyu. It was so cute. We're full, we should go. Jingyu played with the little guy for a long time. She smiled and said, General Shangguan and Miaoqiu are fine now. We should go back now. There is still a big battle waiting for us. Okay. Everyone stopped what they were doing and looked at Jingyu and Xiao Chun. Jingyu and Xiao Chun had been out for a month. It had been so long. The battle in the Roman forest must have already started. In Luan City, there was no news. It was very worrying. Shangguan Hongwan raised his head slightly and asked Jingyu and Xiao Chun, What are your plans after we get out? Return to Jinling village. Jingyu took a deep breath and slowly said, I'm afraid the people of the 4 kingdoms have all arrived. The poison sect and holy family have been active in Baylor for so long. I don't know if they're waiting for us to leave. Chapter 9:11. Jingyu's expression was somewhat grave. Her words caused everyone's expression to change. Shangguan Hongwan also frowned slightly. Luan City was like a happy valley. Once they left Luan City, they would have to face the entire world. 9th Emperors, 9th Imperial Concubine, you're leaving Luan City? Xiang Tian walked in front of Jingyu and Xiao Chun. He frowned slightly as he looked at Jingyu and Xiao Chun. Since we've found the person, we naturally have to leave. Jingyu looked up at Xiang Tian and said, When we first entered the forest, I already said that we're here to find someone. Everyone was silent. At this moment, everyone's brows were furrowed, as if they were thinking about a very serious problem. Everyone's brows were furrowed. Everyone, you all know who we are. Thank you for your help along the way. Jingyu slowly stood up. She looked at everyone and said with a slight smile, I know that you were all forced into the forest by the people of the Southeast Prefecture. Now, we're leaving Luan City. In any case, we've fought a life and death battle. Before we leave, I'll give you a gift. In the future, you won't be obstructed when you travel between Luan City and the Black Earth region. Jingyu's lips curved into a faint smile as a trace of ruthlessness flashed through her eyes. She said indifferently, I've long found the Southeast Prefecture to be an eyesore. If we take the Black Qilin and destroy the Southeast Prefecture, I think it will be very interesting. Jingyu said with a cold smile. Everyone's eyes widened when they heard this. After clearly understanding Jingyu's words, everyone's faces became excited. They looked at Jingyu with slightly red faces. Perhaps it was because Jingyu's words were too touching. Everyone seemed to be able to imagine such a scene. Miss Jingyu. A burly man suddenly stood up. Jingyu still remembered this person. This person seemed to be called Li Chong. Big brother Li, what's the matter? Jingyu looked at Li Chong in confusion and asked, Our lifelong wish is to defeat the people of the Southeast Prefecture. If you really do as you say and destroy the Southeast Prefecture, I, Li Chong, will be yours in the future. How can the bloodshed in the Black Earth region compare to the pleasure of killing with you all? Jingyu's eyes widened in surprise when she heard Li Chong's words. That's right. Another person stood up and said, We've been lonely for a long time. We're willing to follow Miss Jingyu. That's right. What bullshit evildoer. If it wasn't for Miss Jingyu's extraordinary pupils, then we brothers would have been devoured by the ink Qilin a long time ago. In my opinion, Miss Jingyu's extraordinary pupils should be supported by all. Those people must be blind. That's right. We're willing to follow Miss Jingyu. I'm also willing to follow. These people just want to steal Miss Jingyu's eyes. They can't stand to see others doing well. Simply disgusting. They deserve to be killed. Ha ha ha. Being able to leave Luan City and kill in all directions. This feeling is much better than being in the Black Earth region. That's right, that's right. We're willing to follow the 9 emperors. We're willing to follow Miss Jingyu. Everyone spoke one after another and stood up. Their excited and determined expressions made Jingyu stunned. Her original intention was indeed to subdue a group of forces, but Jingyu never thought that it would be in such a way. Chapter 9:12. You all. Jingyu's words paused slightly. Looking at these people, she suddenly felt that their faces were so familiar yet so unfamiliar. To be honest, they had only known each other for such a short period of time. Do you all really want to follow me? Jingyu's gaze slowly swept across everyone's faces. She lowered her eyes slightly and said indifferently, You all have to know who I am and what I am facing. That is the curse of everyone in the world. I am the enemy of everyone in the world. In this Luan City, you can live your lives peacefully. However, if you were to walk out of Luan City with me, what awaits you would be endless slaughter. Everyone will curse and want to kill you. At that time, what awaits you is death. Jingyu slightly closed her eyes and looked at everyone as she said, Even so, are you all willing to be the enemy of everyone in the world? Ha ha ha. What's there to be unwilling about? Li Chong waved his hand and coldly shouted, Miss Jingyu, only you would treat us as normal people? Jingyu heard Li Chong's words and was slightly stunned. She looked at everyone in confusion. Luan City is a place of exile. We are all exiles. Li Chong took a deep breath and said, Some people might be really stupid or really evil. However, are there really good people in this world? We killed people. We set fires. We were all forced to do it. Li Chong fiercely stabbed the knife in his hand into the ground. His eyes were slightly red as he said, That dog official stole my wife. I took revenge for my wife. I crippled him. In the past, I was just a woodcutter. Other than killing a chicken, I didn't even know how to fight. After being exiled to Luan City, the thing I regret the most is that I didn't strike accurately and didn't kill that dog official. Li Chong fiercely gritted his teeth. Perhaps it was a kind of resonance, but everyone's faces became filled with grief and indignation. One by one, they spoke of their past. Most of them were ordinary people. Some offended experts, some accidentally injured others. However, none of them were sentenced to this place. Everyone's original intention was to protect. Either to protect others or to protect themselves, they committed murder and arson, seeking revenge, until they were exiled here. Perhaps in the eyes of others, they were really evil people. But just like Li Chong said, were there really good people in this world? Jingyu didn't know, because she clearly knew that she wasn't a kind person. She would protect the people she wanted to protect, and she would kill whoever dared to touch them. Perhaps she would kill someone else's father or son, but she wouldn't be soft-hearted. If she didn't kill them, she would be the one to die. Good and evil were not judged by others, but by one's own heart. Miss Jingyu, why is it that the people who entered Luan City never left? Li Chong took a deep breath and said, It's not that we can't get out, but that we don't want to. Did you see it when you arrived? It's very clear here. If you want to live, you can only become stronger and stronger. We have already adapted and gotten used to this place. If you ask me to go outside and kowtow to those high officials and nobles, I will rush up and kill them. Li Chong tightly stared at Jingyu and said, In the eyes of those people, we are already crazy, but only we know that we are very clear-headed. Li Chong slightly lowered his head and pulled out the knife that was stabbed into the ground. He looked at Jingyu and said, If Miss Jingyu doesn't dislike us, we are willing to follow you. Chapter 9:13. That's right. Isn't it just killing? Everyone chimed in. We've died so many times already. We're not afraid of death. Follow the Empress of Strange Pupils. Follow the 9 Emperors. We'll be freaking confident if we say that. That's right. That's right. We're willing. Everyone raised the swords in their hands. The emotions in their eyes made Jingyu's heart tremble slightly. She never thought that she would meet such a group of adorable people here. Jingyu's heart trembled violently. She could not imagine that these murderous men in front of her had once lived an ordinary life. Okay. Jingyu took a deep breath and smiled faintly. She looked at everyone and said, "My original plan was to get you guys to join us, huh? Great. I haven't even started asking, and you've already delivered yourselves to my door. Ha ha ha. We've wanted to go out and play for a long time." Li Chong turned to everyone and said, "In this small forest, we've been bullied by the little ink Qilin every day and can only hide. We've been bored to death. If we can go out and do something big, we'll definitely be willing, right?" That's right, that's right. Everyone laughed loudly. Jingyu looked at everyone with a faint smile in her eyes. After saying a few more words, Jingyu lowered her head and looked at the little ink Qilin squatting at her feet. She slowly squatted down and looked at the little guy. "You ate my fish, so you'll have to work for me." Jingyu raised her hand and patted the little guy's head. She said, "Take your companions and follow me to flatten the southeast prefecture. Then you can come back to the Black Earth region. I'll take your brothers with me, and no one will disturb you in the future." Meow, meow. The little guy let out a cry. It looked at Jingyu, and then turned to look at Xiao Chun. It seemed to be excited and happy, but it also seemed to be conflicted. It stared at Jingyu and Xiao Chun for a long time before darting into the forest. Why did it leave? Shangguan Linglan asked with widened eyes as he watched the black Qilin flee. "Everyone, let's eat and drink to our fill. We're going out." Jingyu took a deep breath and shouted loudly, "All right, come on, eat fish. Ha ha ha." Everyone shouted as they ate. Just as they were eating happily and were almost done, they suddenly felt a slight tremor coming from the soles of their feet. Everyone stopped what they were doing and felt the movement under their feet with a puzzled expression. Then, they heard a sound. Everyone who had just sat down stood up again and stretched their necks to look into the depths of the forest. In the forest, the figures of ink Qilins appeared one after another. Everyone looked at the imposing ink Qilins and widened their eyes. No way. Could it be that the black Qilin's frenzy had come again? Jingyu was also shocked. There were at least a few hundred of them. What's this? Everyone was stunned by this scene. Jingyu stared at the situation in front of her. She didn't move, so everyone was silent. If Jingyu told them to run, they would definitely run. Since Jingyu didn't say anything, it shouldn't be a big deal. Hundreds of ink Qilins surrounded the group and stopped in front of them. Everyone stared at the ink Qilins in front of them with widened eyes. Chapter 9:14. Under everyone's gaze, a small body appeared on the head of one of the ink Qilins. It turned out to be the little ink Qilin that ran away not long ago. It came out from the heads of these ink Qilins and blinked its eyes at Jingyu and the rest. "Meow," the little ink Qilin called out. Then, under everyone's stunned gaze, all the ink Qilins knelt down in unison. That's right. They knelt down. Very good. A faint smile appeared in Jingyu's eyes. Looking at the ink Qilins, the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. She turned to everyone and said, "It's time for us to set off. Everyone, ride the ink Qilins." Fuck. Are you for real? Zhanqi's eyes widened the moment Jingyu finished speaking. She looked at Jingyu in horror and asked. Jingyu didn't say anything. Instead, she smiled faintly and walked towards the ink Qilin closest to her. Then, she stepped onto the ink Qilin's back. The ink Qilin that was kneeling on its front paws slowly stood up. Jingyu sat firmly on its back. Hiss. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, and the way they looked at Jingyu changed. When Xiao Chun saw Jingyu sitting on it, he also calmly stepped forward and sat on the back of a black Qilin beside Jingyu. Shangguan Linglan had long been unable to hold back and happily chose a Qilin and sat on it. When everyone saw that this woman had gone up, they naturally couldn't stay still. They all walked towards the ink Qilin closest to them and stepped onto its back nervously. If I go up, will it throw me off? Zhanqi walked around the ink Qilin. For some reason, she didn't dare to go up and asked carefully. Li Weiming sat on the ink Qilin's back and instantly felt very excited. I can't fall in love with it. Hearing Zhanqi's words, One of the ink Qilin turned around. Seeing Zhang Qi's timid look, it replied disdainfully and turned its head away. Heh, I'm going to go up. With that, Zhang Qi closed her eyes and stepped onto the ink Qilin's back. The ink Qilin slowly stood up. Zhang Qi was so shocked that she quickly grabbed onto its fur. Roar! The ink Qilin cried out in pain and let out a roar. Don't pull on their fur too hard. Jingyu silently turned her head and reminded him. She said faintly, just like riding a horse, tighten their abdomens and lower their bodies. These big guys will follow us. As soon as Jingyu finished speaking, the people who were still holding onto the black Qilin's fur hurriedly let go. They let go awkwardly and raised their hands to touch the black Qilin they were sitting on, as if to comfort them. Let's go. Let's go. When Jingyu saw that everyone was seated, her lips curled into a faint smile. She tilted her head and exchanged glances with Xiao Chun. Then, she looked ahead quietly. Her black eyes instantly turned into a dazzling gold. With a clear shout, the ink Qilin she was sitting on let out a low growl and started running slowly. The ink Qilin shuttled through the forest of the black soil region nimbly. At first, it wasn't fast. Because everyone wasn't used to it yet, the running speed was very slow. Jingyu wanted everyone to get used to it as soon as possible. When everyone finally grasped the technique, Jingyu began to speed up bit by bit. The ink Qilin was much faster than a horse. Horses couldn't run through this forest at all, but the ink Qilin was different. Chapter 9:15. They were very human-like. Jingyu and Xiao Chun rode side by side in the front, leading the way. The crowd followed behind them. Some of them were faster, so they quickly caught up with Jingyu. Some of them were slower, so they were left far behind. Besides the more than 100 ink Qilins, the rest of the ink Qilins followed behind or on the sides. They were more like escorts, which made them very excited. In the blink of an eye, everyone had arrived at the small canyon where they had first entered. Looking at the path they had taken, and then looking at their current state, everyone was inexplicably excited. When they had entered, they were in such a sorry state. But now, they had indeed left in such a flashy manner. Roars came out of the black Qilin's mouths one after another. Outside the small canyon, there were also cries. Those cries were much clearer than the cries of the black Qilins. It was obvious that they were the cries of the little guys from the black soil region. Everyone's eyes lit up, and they were filled with joy. Roar! Zhang Qi called out excitedly. Seeing the trees around him retreating and him leaping out of the small canyon, the little ink Qilins outside the canyon seemed to have heard the call as well. They all ran madly towards the small canyon in the forbidden area of the Black Earth Zone. What's going on? Those lone travelers had entered the black soil region to hunt wild beasts. They were originally walking carefully in the forest, but when they suddenly heard so many cries, their eyes revealed a look of surprise. What was even more inconceivable was that there was a group of people who were being attacked by the ink Qilins. They were exhausted and thought that they would die here today. However, they did not expect that after these cries, the little ink Qilins that were attacking them would all run away. This series of changes immediately stunned everyone. Everyone clearly heard that the place where the sound came from was the forbidden area of the Black Soil Zone. Some people who were close to the area quickly ran in the direction of the forbidden area. They stood at the edge of the forest and looked up. After a glance, they were scared silly. On the hillside, countless black Qilins appeared. One after another, they ran down the hillside like a tide. The most frightening thing was that these black Qilins were so huge. What frightened them even more was that there were still people sitting on top of those black Qilins. Am I seeing things? Or am I dreaming? The few people who were nearby looked at the ink Qilins that appeared on the hillside in a daze. The sudden enlargement of their bodies stunned everyone. There are people sitting on them, right? One of them swallowed and asked quietly, I think so. Another person widened his eyes, as if he wanted to see more clearly. He sighed silently and answered, Waha, I'm out. At this moment, An extremely excited shout came from the hillside. The two people who were talking suddenly felt their breathing stagnate, and their eyes widened as they stared at the ink chelan that was running down the hillside in a frenzy. "What are you shouting for?" "Shut up." Ink by ink. Chapter 9:16. I'll shut up just because you want me to. The two of them started quarreling on the hillside for no reason. Jingyu didn't need to turn around to know who the two people quarreling were. Who else could it be but Zhanqi and Li Weiming? She didn't know what was going on with the two of them. When they met, it was as if they were explosives that were set on fire. In front of them was the Black Soil region, the forest where Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan's group had first entered. Because Xiang Tian and the rest had left, there didn't seem to be any changes in the forest. The small ink chelants were still there. At this moment, all the ink chelants were running towards Jingyu's group. When the densely packed ink chelants rushed over, Jingyu wondered if she would accidentally trample the laughing little guy to death. Obviously, Jingyu was overthinking things. The deep cries of the ink chelants could be heard from the forest. There was a commotion in the entire forest. Both humans and beasts were stunned by the situation in front of them. Jingyu's group didn't slow down at all. They rushed into the forest like the wind. Wahaha! This exciting feeling made everyone raise their voices one by one and cheer. The lone travelers who had just entered the forest heard the commotion and all ran towards Jingyu's group. They stared with wide eyes at the people sitting on the ink chelants. Their eyes were filled with astonishment. Not only was the ink chelants enlarged, but there were also people who had the ability to sit on the back of the ink chelants. What was even more frightening was that these people seemed to have come from the forbidden area. Didn't the legends say that anyone who entered the forbidden area would never be able to leave? Then what were the people who came out now? Everyone stared with wide eyes at the group of people who whizzed past. Their eyes were filled with shock. Looking at the direction these people were heading in, they realized that they were going to leave the Black Soil region and head towards Wan City. Instantly, everyone's eyes widened. Quick! Chase after them. When one person moved, the others all chased after him. Their eyes were full of astonishment. They followed the footsteps of Jingyu and the others, chasing after the Black Kylan and following Jingyu forward. The person following behind looked at the Black Chelan running in front of him with a conflicted expression. Back then, who didn't take a detour when they saw the Black Chelan? How could they be so arrogant as to chase after the Black Chelan? Jingyu's golden eyes were so dazzling. Xiao Chan and Jingyu took the lead, followed closely by the others. Almost all the ink chelants in the Black Soil area were gathered together and rushed towards the exit of the Black Soil area like a swarm of bees. Grandpa, listen. What's that sound coming from inside? A young child was playing at the edge of the Black Soil area. He had just picked up a pebble when he suddenly seemed to have heard something. He paused slightly, then ran to the side of the adult in a panic and said in a panic, "Sound? What sound?" The old man was slightly taken aback. He tilted his head slightly to listen and seemed to have heard the sound as well. However, he couldn't identify what it was at that moment. He frowned in confusion and narrowed his eyes as he looked towards the direction of the sound. The sound got closer and closer, and the thunderous footsteps caused the ground to tremble. The old man pulled the child into his arms and looked ahead with a face full of fear. In that direction, countless black chelants rushed out. Chapter 9:17. Ha ha ha. I can see the house. Excited cheers rang out one after another. The guests outside the Black Soil zone all looked at the scene in front of them with shock in their eyes. Countless ink chelants appeared. Weren't the two people who came out first Jingyu and Xiaochen? Jingyu's golden eyes shone brightly under the sun. They were so passionate that it made people feel like they were looking at an arrogant king. On the other hand, Xiao Chen's black eyes were as cold as ice. His black brocade robe made him look like an overlord looking down on the world. When the two of them stood together, neither of them was inferior to the other. They didn't look as if their glory had been stolen. In the eyes of the crowd, The two of them were so harmonious and so compatible. The two ink cheilants they sat on stopped on the wide road in a ferocious manner. The people walking around had already retreated behind the doors. They all shrunk back and looked at Jingyu and Xiao Chun with fear in their eyes. When they saw Jingyu's eyes, they immediately knew who she was. That's the Empress of Strange Pupils? One of them swallowed and said, "Didn't they say that the Empress of Strange Pupils entered the black soil zone and was bitten to death by an ink cheilin? Are you blind?" Someone beside him slapped him hard on the head and said, "An ink cheilin would bite the Empress of Strange Pupils to death? Then look at what she's riding on. Is it a mutated dark horse?" What? What a huge ink cheilin. That person swallowed and stared at the ink cheilants riding on Jingyu's group, his eyes full of fear. "Hey, look at that person. Isn't that Xiang Xing?" Finally, someone's gaze fell on the group of men behind Jingyu. They didn't know until they saw them, but when they saw them, they were shocked. Their eyes widened in horror as they looked at the group of people sitting on the black cheilin behind Jingyu and Xiao Qian. Isn't that Li Chong? I saw with my own eyes that he killed my brother, stole his things, and ran away. And isn't that? Everyone's eyes widened as they recognized the people behind Jingyu. People like Li Weiming were people that people would run away from whenever they saw them in the black soil region. Which one of them hadn't been killed before? To be honest, they were all enemies. However, in Luan City, in the black soil region, there had never been eternal enemies or eternal friends. At this moment, when they saw that these people who should have stayed in the black soil region forever had all come out, each and every one of them widened their eyes. What's going on? Everyone's eyes widened as they stared at the path filled with black cheilants. Their gazes fell on Jingyu and Xiao Chun. Didn't you hear? These people have all entered the forbidden area of the black soil region. Just a moment ago, they all came out of the forbidden area. These big guys were released from the forbidden area. A person ran over quickly and explained to the people who were still unaware of the situation. What? They came out of the forbidden area. When everyone heard this, they widened their eyes in horror. How did you know? Someone asked. Did you see behind them? Wang Chue brought people in to hunt and saw it with his own eyes. That person pointed at the entrance of the black soil zone. Everyone craned their necks to take a look. Only then did they see that behind the black mass of black cheilants weren't those hunters who had entered not long ago. Chapter 9:18. Let's go. Jingyu glanced around indifferently and led the group forward slowly. The people on the street made way for them. They looked at Jingyu and the ink cheilin with horror. Even a 3-year-old child in Luan City knew about the ferocious reputation of the ink cheilin. Originally, these ink cheilants were trapped in the black soil area and would not come out at all. However, not only did they come out today, but so many of them. The most frightening thing was that there were people riding ink cheilants. Everyone watched Jingyu and the others walk through the street. In the midst of a long howl, the ink cheilin seemed to have received some kind of order. It let out a ferocious growl and directly crashed into the Southeast Prefecture. Ha ha ha. Southeast Prefecture. Jingyu's lips curled into a cold and arrogant smile. She raised her hand and shouted, "Flatten the Southeast Prefecture." Roar. Ha ha ha. Take out your fucking weapons. Kill these sons of bitches from the Southeast Prefecture. Flatten the Southeast Prefecture. Ha! A chorus of agreement rang out. Everyone rushed forward as if they had gone mad. Before the guards of the Southeast Prefecture could understand what was going on, they were instantly flattened by the black cheilin. This was the true flattening of the legends. Boom! The gate of the Southeast Prefecture, which had stood for many years, was directly smashed open by these people. Countless ink cheilants and these people swarmed in. Everyone ran inside. The people of the Southeast Prefecture were indeed well trained. They reacted almost instantly. Countless guards rushed forward and tried to capture the ink cheilants, but how could this be possible? A person who came forward was instantly pressed down by a group of ink cheilants. Stop! A sharp, ear-piercing sound of metal colliding rang out. Jingyu was extremely familiar with this voice. Wasn't this the voice of the Southeast Prefecture's chief? With this shout, everyone stopped what they were doing and looked up. Jingyu coldly raised her chin and looked at the black-clothed iron-masked man standing not far away. The 9th Emperor's and the 9th Imperial Concubine. The iron-masked man was completely covered by a black robe, only revealing his eyes. He stared at Jingyu and Xiao Chun. His eyes seemed to contain anger and coldness as he stared at Jingyu and Xiao Chun. "Why are you doing this to my Southeast Prefecture?" The iron-masked man's ear-piercing voice rang out. "Why don't you ask them what they mean?" Jingyu's lips curled into a faint smile. She dragged the enchanting to the side, revealing the people behind her. The iron-masked man also slowly looked over. After Jingyu stepped aside, everyone's faces were revealed. "Hee, Emoching, you didn't expect me to come back, did you?" Li Weiming carried a huge sword on his back. At this moment, he flipped off the enchanting's back and stood in front of the iron-masked man. He stared fiercely at the man and said, "Li Weiming." The chief of the Southeast Prefecture probably didn't expect to see Li Weiming here. There was some astonishment in his eyes. Chapter 9:19. He turned his head and scanned their faces one by one. Finally, he realized that these people were all the people who were driven into the Black Soil Zone by the Southeast Prefecture. These people, who had almost no chance of surviving, had once again appeared in front of him. "I thought, with your cowardly looks, you would have been eaten by the Black Qilin long ago." The iron-masked man didn't have any special reaction when he saw Li Weiming and the others. Perhaps it was because the iron mask covered his face, so others couldn't see his expression. Emoching. Just as the iron-masked man finished speaking, a shout suddenly came from the crowd. A slender figure slowly walked out from the crowd of beasts. He held a long sword in his hand, and his entire body exuded a cold and frosty aura. "I said that if I can survive the Black Soil Zone within 5 years, then it will be time for me to take your life." The person who walked out was none other than Xiang Tian. Xiang Tian was dressed in black. He lowered his head slightly and slowly pulled out the long sword in his hand. The sword glinted with a cold light as he pointed it at Emoching. Although the cold tip of the sword was pointed at Emoching, Xiang Tian's entire body was filled with an incomparably cold and desolate aura. Jingyu, who was standing at the side, saw clearly that the moment Emoching saw Xiang Tian, his eyes trembled violently. There seemed to be a flash of surprise in his eyes, as well as surprise. Why was that? It wasn't a big deal that Emoching knew Xiang Tian, but why was he surprised? Jingyu frowned slightly as she watched their movements. "You want to kill me?" Emoching's piercing voice slowly rang out. He stared straight at Xiang Tian. After a moment of silence, he stared at Xiang Tian and said, "They want to kill me. I admit it. I drove them into the Black Soil Zone with my own hands. In Luan City, good-for-nothings like them can't survive. It's better for them to die early." Emoching said indifferently, "But you? What right do you have to kill me? You killed her, so I'll kill you." Jingyu could clearly feel the deep hatred in the depths of Xiang Tian's eyes when he mentioned her. That kind of extreme emotion made Jingyu's eyes widen slightly. "It's been 5 years, and you're still the same." When Emoching heard Xiang Tian's words, he clenched his black-gloved hand and raised his head slightly. He stood on the stone steps and looked at Xiang Tian. "To avenge her? So, you want to kill me?" "That's right," Xiang Tian coldly replied. "All right, I would like to see just how fast the sword in your hand is." Xiang Tian, whose name shakes the entire Black Soil region. As Emoching spoke, he suddenly raised his hand and pulled out the long sword at his waist. Just like that, he faced Xiang Tian. What made Jingyu extremely surprised was that she didn't expect the Southeast Prefecture's prefecture chief Emoching's martial arts to be so similar to Xiang Tian's martial arts. The speed of his sword was also so fast. The two of them were locked in battle on the open ground. Jingyu and Xiao Chun stood on the side and quietly watched the two people in front of them. Just as Jingyu felt that it was strange, Xiao Chun suddenly said, "He's not a Mo Qing?" "What?" Jingyu was slightly taken aback when she heard this. She raised her head and looked at Xiao Chun in confusion. "He's not a Mo Qing." Xiao Chun repeated again. He stared at the person fighting with Xiang Tian and said indifferently, "This person is fake." Chapter 920. Jingyu finally understood. Her eyes trembled slightly as she turned to look at Xiang Tian and Mo Qing. Her heart was filled with confusion. Mo Qing was the governor of the Southeast Prefecture, but Xiao Chun said this Mo Qing was not the real Mo Qing. What was going on? I've fought with Mo Qing before. If this is Mo Qing, then Xiang Tian is no match for him. Xiao Chun said indifferently, "Moreover, I severely injured him back then. I thought he would die in a few months. If this person in front of us is not a Mo Qing, then who is he? Why is he pretending to be a Mo Qing?" Jingyu frowned slightly. Most of the fights were still going on, but she could clearly feel that a Mo Qing couldn't hold on any longer, and he began to retreat. "Xiang Tian, don't kill him." Jingyu did not know what was going through her mind, but she instinctively shouted. Xiang Tian was obviously going to kill a Mo Qing, but when he heard Jingyu shout, the sword in his hand suddenly deviated. The long sword that was about to slit Mo Qing's throat was suddenly diverted. Xiang Tian's body spun and landed on the ground. He kicked Mo Qing's chest fiercely. With a muffled groan, Mo Qing's body fell to the ground. The iron mask on his face cracked inch by inch. Everyone's eyes widened as they stared at the mask on Mo Qing's face. Under everyone's gaze, the mask cracked and half of it fell off. Half of a fair face was revealed. A pair of incomparably beautiful eyes trembled slightly, and the beauty mark between her eyebrows was so alluring. The cloak that was slid open by the sword fell open, and her long black hair scattered on the ground. Dark red blood seeped out of the corner of her mouth. Everyone was stunned by this sudden turn of events. Everyone stared with wide eyes at the woman who had fallen to the ground. No one expected such a devastatingly beautiful face to be hidden under the ghostly iron mask. No one expected the infamous governor of the Southeast Prefecture to be such a woman. Jingyu was also stunned by this sudden situation. She stared blankly at the person in front of her. No wonder when they first met, Jingyu felt that this person's movements were so feminine, and there was even a scent of incense on him. It turned out that he was not a transvestite like she thought, but a woman. Fair. Just as everyone was astonished by this, Xiang Tian's expression changed drastically when he saw half of the woman's face. His cold, handsome face was completely drained of blood at this moment. He stared at the woman who fell to the ground in disbelief. Ahem. The woman coughed slightly and lowered her eyes. Under everyone's gaze, she slowly stood up with her hands on the ground. Her body was still covered in a wide black robe, and her black hair fluttered gently in the wind. "Since you want to avenge her, why don't you kill her?" Mo Qing's eyes were calm and sorrowful. His soft words and calm voice were no longer disguised. It was a woman's voice. It was so moving and pleasant to the ears. "You're not a Mo Qing." Li Weiming, Zhan Qi, and the others finally reacted. "Mo Qing died 5 years ago," the woman said faintly. She turned to look in the direction of Jingyu and Xiao Chen, and said with a slight smile, "Mo Qing's death is all thanks to the help of the 9th Emperors. If it weren't for the 9th Emperors who severely injured Mo Qing, I wouldn't have been able to kill him." Chapter 921. What? When the woman's words fell, Li Weiming, Zhan Qi, and the others all widened their eyes in shock. Just when everyone was confused, Xiang Tian, who had been standing in place, suddenly walked towards the woman. No one knew what expression he had on his calm face. Jingyu's heart skipped a beat when she saw Xiang Tian's expression. Is this person still going to kill her? You actually dared to lay your hands on such a beautiful woman? You. The woman looked at Xiang Tian and was about to speak when Xiang Tian suddenly reached out and pulled the woman into his arms. Everyone was dumbfounded. Jingyu was about to go forward and save her, but she didn't expect Xiang Tian to suddenly do this. Everyone was stunned. What's going on now? Wasn't he going to kill her a second ago? Why did he hug her in the blink of an eye? Fair. Xiang Tian hugged the woman tightly. His strength was so great that the woman probably didn't expect Xiang Tian to suddenly hug her. Her whole body stiffened on the spot and didn't move at all. You're still alive, still alive. Xiang Tian's whispers sounded in her ears. The woman's eyes widened in shock. She was completely stunned by the situation in front of her. Sister Fei. Sister Fei. At this moment, another voice sounded. Xiang Tian slowly let go of his hand. Xiang Xing ran towards Xiang Tian in surprise and hugged the woman. His eyes were filled with tears as he called out in surprise. Sister Fei, you're really not dead. You're still alive. Woo-woo. That's great. That's great. Xiang Xing hugged the woman and said happily. Xinger. The woman called Sister Fei was even more confused. She touched Xiang Xing's head and said, why did you think I was dead? Sister Fei. Xiang Xing looked up at the woman and said, I saw you enter the forbidden area of the black soil zone with my own eyes. What? When the woman heard this, her eyes widened in shock. It was as if she knew something incredible. She clenched her fists and suddenly turned to look at Xiang Tian. Why did you go to the Black Earth region? Looking for you. Xiang Tian's eyes did not leave the woman at all. When he heard her question, his face darkened slightly, and he slowly responded. Looking for me? Could it be that you didn't go to the Black Lands to save Zhuer? Could it be that you didn't go to the Black Earth region to avoid me? The woman's eyes were filled with shock as she looked at Xiang Tian with astonishment. Young Zhuer? Xiang Tian's expression froze for a moment, but there was no change in his expression as he replied, What does her life or death have to do with me? Xiangtian, aren't you going to marry Zhuer? When the woman heard Xiang Tian's words, a look of fear appeared on her face. Her body trembled slightly and tears appeared in her eyes. Who told you that? When Tiang heard the woman's words, he frowned. He stared at the woman and asked, I only met her by chance. I don't have any feelings for her. Why would I marry her for no reason? You're not going to marry Zhuer? Then why would Zhuer tell me? At this moment, the woman's words suddenly stopped as if she had sensed something. Her eyes widened and her face was filled with shock. Chapter 922. Jingyu, Xiaochun, and the others were at a loss. What was the situation now? Should they kill this person or not? Aya. Just as Jingyu was at a loss, Zhan Qi, who was standing behind Jingyu, suddenly raised his hand and clapped fiercely. There was a look of surprise in his eyes, as if he had thought of something. He stared at the woman standing with Xiang Tian and said, Isn't she Lu Feier? Lu Feier? Jingyu turned to look at Zhan Qi in confusion and asked, Do you know this woman? I know her. How could I not know her? Zhan Qi's eyes were full of excitement as he said, This young master was also one of Miss Fei Er's admirers. 5 years ago, who in Luan City didn't know the names of Lu Fei and Yang Zhuer? Yang Zhuer? Jingyu frowned slightly, and her gaze fell on Xiang Tian and Lu Fei. When the two were talking just now, they mentioned this name. It should be this Zhuer. That's right. Zhan Qi crossed his arms and looked at Xiang Tian and Lu Fei, who were talking, and said, At that time, Xiang Tian had just entered Luan City for less than a year. I don't know what happened, but he got into a fight with Lu Fei. As soon as the two met, they would fight. Miss Jingyu, you don't know. Lu Fei's appearance is devastatingly beautiful, but her martial arts are not something an ordinary man can handle. Zhan Qi said with admiration, Only Xiang Tian can suppress her, but Miss Fei is also a person who doesn't admit defeat. The two of them got to know each other out of a fight. Anyone with a discerning eye can see that Xiang Tian is very gentle to Miss Fei. Zhan Qi clicked his tongue and said, He doesn't use his full strength when fighting. Nonsense. Jingyu glared at Zhanqi and said with a cold face, could it be that you can use your full strength against a woman? Cough, cough, cough. Zhanqi coughed silently and continued, in Luan City, besides Lu Fei'er, there is also a girl called Yang Zhu'er. She is a good sister of Lu Fei'er. When she saw that Miss Fei'er was bullied, she went to find Xiang Tian for revenge, but who knew that she would take a liking to Xiang Tian? Miss Jingyu, you don't know. This Miss Zhu'er is called Shrewish. Once she took a fancy to Xiang Tian, she chased after him without a second word. Originally, this Miss Fei'er was still fighting with Xiang Tian, but because of Yang Zhu'er, the matter was left unsettled. Zhanqi continued. The matter between the three of them caused quite a ruckus in Luan City at that time. In addition, the mansion master of the southeast province took a fancy to Miss Fei'er and repeatedly pressured her. As for what happened after that, I'm not sure either. Zhanqi silently shrugged and said, let go. Just as Jingyu was about to ask Zhanqi something, the two people who were talking over there suddenly quarreled. Jingyu quickly cast her gaze over. Xiang Tian, I'm no longer the Lu Fei'er of the past. I'm now your enemy, the Southeast Prefecture's prefecture lord. Lu Fei'er lowered her eyes slightly. When she opened them again, they were full of indifference. She looked at Xiang Tian indifferently and said, I don't want to know what happened back then. Today, if you want to flatten the Southeast Prefecture, then you'll have to step over my body. Lu Fei'er looked at Xiang Tian and the others indifferently. Sister Fei. Xiang Xing looked at Lu Fei'er with a pair of astonished eyes. His eyes were full of disbelief as he stared at Lu Fei'er and said, Sister Fei, Big Brother has been looking for you for 5 years. Big Brother. Chapter 9:23. Fei'er, tell me why. Xiang Tian clenched his fists tightly and stared at Lu Fei'er. From the beginning to the end, the only person I want to marry is you. When Lu Fei'er heard Xiang Tian's words, her body trembled violently. She raised her head slightly and looked at Xiang Tian with tears in her eyes. She stared at Xiang Tian and said, you don't know how much I looked forward to hearing these words 5 years ago. But now, Xiang Tian, you can't go back? Lu Fei'er took a deep breath, looked at Xiang Tian and said, don't you see? What am I like now? As Lu Fei'er spoke, she waved her hand and pointed at the Southeast Prefecture's mansion behind her. She said indifferently, I'm now the Southeast Prefecture's mansion master. I'm a villain in everyone's eyes. Our relationship, either you die or I die. Miss Fei'er, there's no need to make it sound so scary. Before Xiang Tian could speak, Jingyu spoke calmly with a faint smile on her lips. She walked towards Xiang Tian, Lu Fei'er, and the others. She looked at the two of them and sighed deeply. In fact, Jingyu didn't need to guess at all. Based on the conversation between Xiang Tian and Lu Fei'er, plus the news from Zhanqi, Jingyu could guess what had happened to them. Obviously, Lu Fei'er seemed to have noticed it from the conversation just now. There was indeed something wrong with what happened 5 years ago. I just want to ask you, why did you become the mansion master of the Southeast Mansion? If I'm not wrong, your initial idea should be to kill Imoqing and eradicate the Southeast Mansion, right? Jingyu slowly stood in front of Xiang Tian and Lu Fei'er and asked indifferently, yes. Lu Fei'er raised her hand to wipe the blood from the corner of her mouth. She tilted her head slightly to look at Jingyu and said calmly, my initial idea was to kill Imoqing, but before I killed him, he said something to me. What did he say? When everyone heard Lu Fei'er's words, they all showed doubts in their eyes. They frowned slightly and asked Lu Fei'er, haha, I want to ask you, if you really kill me, kill the Southeast Prefecture's prefecture lord, and flatten the Southeast Prefecture, then there will be no more Southeast Prefecture in Luan City. Do you really think Luan City is good? Lu Fei'er slowly looked at everyone and said, within Luan City, there is slaughter and competition. This Southeast Prefecture is the core of Luan City. Lu Fei'er's eyes were full of memories. In a trance, She seemed to have returned to 5 years ago, when she charged into the southeast prefecture with anger and hot-bloodedness. That was the first time she saw the face under the iron mask. It was a very delicate and handsome man, but he had a pair of extremely frightening and deep eyes. The first thing he asked her was, if there was no southeast province in Luan City, what would happen to Luan City? Her answer was that there would be no more bullying. No more people would be chased to the Black Soil region. No more punishments. In her imagination, Luan City would be an extremely good place. However, Imo Qing's answer completely shocked Lu Fei-er. Without the Southeast Prefecture, the three major sects will definitely strengthen in an instant. This Luan City will be completely divided by the three major sections. The strong will definitely do evil. There will be no rules, no punishment. There will be no humanity in this Luan City. Lu Fei-er slowly spat out these words. Chapter 9:24. Imo Qing had said this to her, and now she was saying it to Jing Yu and the others. Do you think you were banished to the Black Soil Zone because you offended the Southeast Prefecture? Lu Fei-er looked calmly at Li Weiming, Zhan Qi, and the others and said indifferently, have you forgotten how you lived before you entered the Black Soil Zone? No matter how much you were bullied, you didn't fight back. Do you think you can live without fighting back? If you still stay in Luan City, there is only one path, death. When Lu Fei-er's words fell, everyone's expression changed. I clearly remember that there were 500 people who entered the Black Soil Zone with you, but how many of them are alive now? Lu Fei-er looked silently at Li Weiming and the others and said with a slight smile, tell me, if someone slapped you now, what would you do? I'll fucking chop off his hand. One of them roared fiercely. If this was before, what would you do? As soon as Lu Fei-er's question fell, everyone fell silent. Without the coercion of life and death, there would be no transformation of being reborn from blood. These people had courage in their bones, but sometimes they would rather hide cowardly than be courageous. In the Black Soil Zone, although it was called banishment, it was actually a kind of experience, a kind of opportunity. If you survived, you would be your own king. If you failed, you would not be a coward. Is this why you killed Imo Qing but put on a mask yourself? Jing Yu was deeply shocked at this moment. She looked at Lu Fei-er with a deep gaze. It had to be said that these words also reminded Jing Yu. Yes. Lu Fei-er nodded slightly and looked sideways at Jing Yu. Imo Qing lost himself. Even if I didn't kill him, he wouldn't have lived for long. If he hadn't lost himself, he wouldn't have brought the 9 emperors into purgatory for no reason. Punishment. The ferocity has seeped into his bones. He can't control himself. Lu Fei-er said lightly, I will become like this in the future. No, I won't let you become like this. Xiang Tian stared at Lu Fei-er and said, I understand. Jing Yu exhaled deeply. She finally had a better understanding of the powerful Southeast Prefecture. She also understood why Xiao Chun was captured here. The murderous intent in her heart didn't seem so bad anymore. I was the one who personally sent you into the Black Soil region. You've finally come out. Since you're here to seek revenge, I'll take this revenge. Lu Fei-er turned her gaze to Li Weiming's more than 100 people and said with a slight smile, I've been waiting for this day for a long time. Let's see who dares to touch her. As soon as Lu Fei-er finished speaking, Xiang Tian's expression suddenly changed. He turned around abruptly and raised the long sword in his hand. He stood in front of Lu Fei-er and stared coldly at Li Weiming's group. His murderous aura made everyone's face darken. Fuck, do you have to do this? Li Weiming jumped up in an instant. He stared at Xiang Tian with a look of disgust and said, we're brothers who have gone through thick and thin together for 5 years. She's your fucking woman. Can we really kill her? Chapter 9:25. That's right. The person I want to kill is Imo-ching. Another person also frowned with a conflicted expression. But since Imo-ching is already dead, then we won't kill him. Hee. Actually, it's quite fun in the Black Earth region. Another person raised his hand and scratched his head. Seeing those people run away as if they've seen a ghost, it's especially interesting. Isn't that so? Speaking of which, we have to thank Miss Fayer. Everyone spoke one after another. Their laughing and joking appearance made Xiang Tian stunned. Lu Fayer, who was standing behind Xiang Tian, also widened her eyes. Looking at this scene, she didn't know why, but she suddenly felt the tip of her nose sour. I'm the one who made you suffer. I don't know if you're alive or dead every day. Lu Fei closed her eyes slightly. Then what about yourself? Xiang Tian slowly turned around and looked at Lu Fei. Wearing this mask, you'll become the biggest villain in Luan City. Playing the role of someone else, if you're not careful, you'll be seen through. What kind of disaster would that be? It's been 5 years. You've been living like walking on thin ice. I'm willing. Lu Fei slowly lowered her head. Xiang Tian's words pierced her heart, making her heart tremble slightly. In order to imitate Imo-ching well, she hid it for a month and hid in the southeast prefecture. She said she was recuperating, but in fact, she was practicing hard. How to walk like a man, how to sit like a man. In order to practice her falsetto voice, she almost ruined her own voice. Every day, every time she went out, she was so scared and on edge. She dealt with all kinds of assassinations and practiced hard. In these 5 years, she didn't know how much blood she shed and how much sweat she shed, but not a single drop of tear appeared in her eyes. She was willing to do all of this. Luan City was the place she wanted to protect. We won't tell anyone about today's matter. Jingyu looked at Lu Fei. She suddenly admired this woman from the bottom of her heart. She took a deep breath and said, "The Southeast Prefecture is still the Southeast Prefecture. I think even if we want to make a move, Xiang Tian won't let us." As Jingyu spoke, she looked at Lu Fei with a slight smile and said, "Actually, the so-called uncontrollable is just your own inner demon causing trouble. If you don't think about this, you won't have an inner demon." Jingyu frowned slightly. She felt that her explanation was too general, but she didn't know how to explain it. "Miss Fayer, do you think I'm a monster?" Jingyu paused slightly and looked up at Lu Fei. "No." Lu Fei shook her head and said with amusement, "I don't think you're a bad person. Whether it's your identity as the Southeast Prefecture's chief when we first met, or your identity as Lu Fei today, in my eyes, you're just the chief of the Southeast Prefecture." It turned out that humans and animals could interact like this. It was really interesting. "With your small physique, what do you think you can help me with by following me?" Jingyu squatted down and said earnestly to Little Meow, "Isn't it good to play with your friends in the black soil area?" "Why didn't you give Zonghua to Miaoqiu?" Shangguan Linglan felt wronged and shouted at Xiao Chun indignantly. "Zonghua is more suitable for you." Xiao Chun calmly replied. When he saw that Jingyu was not carrying any other beasts, his lips curled into a satisfied smile. He lifted his arm and hugged Jingyu's waist as he strode forward. There were only a few black cheilants on the stairs and floor on the other side of the restaurant. These black cheilants. Jingyu looked at these black cheilants in a dilemma. She frowned slightly and waved her hand helplessly. "Don't care about them. Let them stay in this restaurant. I haven't bathed in days. Go, go, go. I want to take a bath. Jingyu looked at her clothes in disdain and ran upstairs. Xiao Chun smiled faintly and followed Jingyu upstairs. Hey, hey, hey. What about the flower burial ground? Shangguan Linglan shouted when he saw Jingyu and Xiao Chun leaving. Chapter 929. I'll sleep with you. Jingyu replied with a chuckle. She hid on the second floor and found a room that she was quite satisfied with before entering. Jingyu. Even though she was hiding in the room, she could still hear Shangguan Linglan's angry roars. Jingyu was about to burst into laughter. She silently thought to herself that she must be on guard against Shangguan Linglan in the future. If Shangguan Linglan decided to take revenge on her, that would be a completely terrible rhythm. Jingyu comfortably scrubbed her body in the bathtub. She had never felt so comfortable before. When Jingyu came out of the bathtub in satisfaction, Xiao Chun had already finished bathing. He leaned against the soft couch in the room with his chin propped up and a cup of tea in his hand. Xiao Chun. Jingyu yawned and called out. She was wearing a long robe and her black hair was slightly wet. She lazily walked towards Xiao Chun and sat beside him. She leaned on Xiao Chun and said, "Help me dry my hair." Okay. Xiao Chun put down the teacup in his hand and put his arm around Jingyu's waist. He raised his hand and took a dry towel to dry Jingyu's hair. That gentle action made Jingyu lie on Xiao Chun's lap. She comfortably closed her eyes and there was a faint smile in her eyes. Xiao Chun, I'm afraid that it won't be easy to return to Jinling this time. Jingyu slightly tilted her head and looked at Xiao Chun. We came to Wan City to save people, but in my opinion, it's more like we're taking refuge. We haven't received any news from the outside world for so long. I don't know what the outside world is like now. Don't worry, Xiao Chun lightly said while drying Jingyu's hair. They can withstand it. Okay, Jingyu faintly replied and lowered her head. Xiao Chun gently rubbed Jingyu's hair. When he felt that it was almost dry, he raised his hand and put down the towel. He flipped Jingyu's body so that Jingyu's face was facing him. He stared at Jingyu's face for a while but didn't say anything. What's wrong? Jingyu blinked and asked Xiao Chun. Nothing. The corner of Xiao Chun's mouth slightly curved up. He raised his hand and caressed Jingyu's face. He traced her facial features and said, How do you plan to deal with the people from the Holy Family? Do you still need to ask? We will not turn back until the Saint clan is exterminated. Jingyu slowly sat up with her arms propped up. Her eyes were cold as she said, As long as I, Jingyu, am alive, the Holy Family, the Poison Sect, will never be allowed to exist. Xiao Chun slightly furrowed his brows when he heard this. He raised his hand to take Jingyu's hand and said, I'll go with you. Xiao Chun, do you know what's going on with my eyes? Jingyu raised her head and caressed the corners of Jingyu's eyes. She looked up at Xiao Chun and asked, I've always felt that there's something very strange about your eyes. I don't know. Xiao Chun stared into Jingyu's eyes and said indifferently, Perhaps you'll have to ask Qinggu about your eyes. I'll ask him when I get back. Jingyu slightly furrowed her brows. Sometimes, Jingyu felt uneasy, but other times, she didn't feel that way. This feeling of unease seemed to be because of her strange eyes. Jingyu wanted to pull her hand back, but Xiao Chun raised his hand and grabbed it. Jingyu was startled as she watched Xiao Chun's gaze fall on her finger. The obvious mark on Jingyu's middle finger caused Xiao Chun's expression to darken. Chapter 930. Xiao Chun. Jingyu frowned slightly and called out to Xiao Chun softly. Are you tired? Xiao Chun closed his eyes slightly and held Jingyu's hand tightly. He gently kissed the back of Jingyu's hand and looked tenderly at Jingyu with his pitch-black eyes. Jingyu looked at Xiao Chun and nodded slightly. Xiao Chun stood up with Jingyu in his arms and slowly walked towards the bed. After such a tiring period, even Xiao Chun felt tired, let alone Jingyu. When the two of them woke up, it was already the next morning. Jingyu opened her eyes and saw Xiao Chun's face. Jingyu felt very comfortable. She opened her eyes and looked at Xiao Chun. She blinked slightly and closed her eyes again. She raised her arms and hugged Xiao Chun's waist. She rubbed against Xiao Chun's chest and enjoyed this moment of peace. Xiao Chun's arms tightened slightly, and he tilted his head to kiss Jingyu's forehead. "You're awake?" His hoarse voice sounded lazily, as if he had just woken up. "Uh-huh," Jingyu responded. She supported herself with her arms and lay on Xiao Chun's chest. She raised her head and looked at Xiao Chun with a faint smile. "What are you smiling about? You look so happy." Xiao Chun looked at Jingyu's bright and beautiful face, and a faint smile appeared in his eyes. He raised his hand and pinched Jingyu's cheek. "I had a dream last night," Jingyu excitedly said to Xiao Chun. "I dreamt that on the day of our wedding, Daddy wouldn't let me marry you. Then you brought a large group of soldiers and came to snatch me away. In the end, Daddy used a broom to chase you away." Ha ha ha. Xiao Chun's face darkened slightly when he heard this. He tightened his arms around Jingyu and said, "Fortunately, it was a dream. If I really couldn't marry you, I would definitely go crazy." Ha ha ha. Jingyu buried her head in Xiao Chun's arms and laughed. The more she thought about that scene, the funnier it became. However, for some reason, as she laughed, Jingyu's eyes became wet. Her daddy. Jingyu hugged Xiao Chun tightly and buried her head in his chest, suppressing the sadness in her heart. "You have to take revenge with your own hands. Daddy, I won't let you wait too long." Today was the day when Luan City was at its strongest. Early in the morning, Luan City had exploded. To be precise, since yesterday, Luan City had been in chaos. Countless forces, big and small, had all been harassed. Who knew how many people had died in one night? There was no doubt that the killers were Li Chong and Li Weiming's group that Jingyu had brought out. When Jingyu and Xiao Chun had rested enough and packed up, they rode their enchanting and swaggered through the streets to Luan City's gate. However, they were stunned by the scene in front of them. Looking at the hundreds of people in front of them, their eyes widened. "This is..." Jingyu looked at Li Chong and Li Weiming, who were standing at the front of the group. Her eyes widened as she asked in confusion, "Miss Jingyu, the situation is like this?" Li Chong scratched his head and said, "Last night, us brothers were so excited that we couldn't sleep. Since we had nothing to do, we went to challenge all the forces in Luan City. Then, we originally went to fight. However, we don't know who leaked the news that we were going to leave with the 9th Emperors and the Empress of different pupils. Then, these people pestered us and said that they wanted to leave with us and fight with us. Then this happened." Chapter 931. After Li Chong finished speaking, he silently touched the tip of his nose and looked awkwardly at Jingyu. "I was thinking that the more people there are, the better. So, I asked them to come along." "That, Miss Jingyu, if you don't want so many people, I will ask them to leave immediately." Li Chong hurriedly added, "Want to follow us?" Jingyu's gaze swept across the faces of the hundreds of people behind her. Then, she tilted her head and looked at Xiao Chun with a questioning look in her eyes. "Follow us." Xiao Chun looked indifferently at the crowd and said, "Follow us. It's not that you can't follow us, but there are requirements." "9th Emperors, please speak." The crowd shouted in response. "Follow us, and you will be a team in the future. Or rather, an army. There is only one requirement, and that is to obey orders." Xiao Chun looked indifferently at the crowd and said, "All of you need to do is to obey orders. This king doesn't care how powerful you are in Luan City. As long as you leave Luan City and join this team, you will have to obey the orders of this king. If you disobey, you will be killed." After Xiao Chun's words, everyone's faces turned ugly. They were carefree and unrestrained in Luan City. How could they endure being controlled? "If you can't do it, Leave on your own. Xiao Chen looked indifferently at the crowd. He didn't try to persuade them to stay, nor did he waver. After Xiao Chen's words, sure enough, some people slowly left. Xiao Chen wasn't in a hurry. He sat quietly on the black Qilin and looked at those people, waiting for them to leave. When most of them had left, there were only 200 people left in the originally huge team. Among them, more than 100 people had been brought out by Jingyu from the Black Soil region. What made Jingyu feel extremely gratified was that none of the 100 people who had come out from the Black Soil region had left. The remaining dozens of people were willing to follow in Wan City. No one wants to leave? Xiao Chen asked again. Everyone looked at each other and shook their heads silently. In that case, get on the Black Qilin and let's go, Xiao Chen said indifferently. Everyone's eyes widened. Their eyes were filled with astonishment. Did they hear it wrong? Black Qilin? What? You don't want to? Xiao Chen's eyes narrowed as he stared at the crowd. No. I'm willing. Everyone's eyes were filled with surprise as they nodded in agreement. Everyone walked towards the Black Qilin excitedly. Those who had chosen to leave were also shocked when they saw that the person who stayed behind could ride the Black Qilin. I'm very happy that you can stay. Jingyu glanced at Xiao Chen and then turned to look at those people. She smiled and said, Now, I have something to tell you. What do you think of the Black Qilin? Jingyu narrowed her eyes and asked the crowd, This? Everyone looked at each other and scratched their heads. They couldn't say anything. What would you think if I asked you to fight alongside the Black Qilin? Jingyu asked again as she looked at the crowd with a slight smirk. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.